The notification lit up my phone at exactly 8:47 on a Tuesday evening. I was kneeling beside the bathtub in our small Denver apartment, one hand steadying my 4-year-old daughter as she splashed among her fleet of rubber ducks, the other holding a device that was about to complicate my life in ways I could never have anticipated. The app was called Kindred, one of those dating platforms my mother had insisted I download 3 weeks earlier during one of her gentle but persistent campaigns to pull me back into the land of the living. I had swiped through profiles half-heartedly, mostly to appease her, never expecting anything to come of it. But there it was glowing against the steam-fogged screen. "Congratulations, you have matched with Vivian." My fingers went numb. The phone nearly slipped from my grasp and tumbled into the bathwater, where Wren was conducting an elaborate rescue mission involving a yellow duck and a washcloth submarine. I caught it just in time, my heart hammering against my ribs as I stared at the photograph attached to the notification. There was no mistaking that face. The sharp cheekbones, the dark hair pulled back in her signature professional twist, the eyes that could pin you to your seat during a client presentation. Vivian Mercer, marketing director at Sterling and Associates. The woman who had hired me 6 months ago, my direct supervisor, and apparently someone who had just swiped right on my dating profile. Wren looked up at me with water dripping from her chin, her face bright with innocent curiosity. "Daddy, your phone made the happy sound." She splashed her hands against the surface, sending droplets across my shirt. "Does that mean something good happened?" I forced a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "Just a message, sweetheart. Nothing important." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. I set the phone face down on the bathroom counter and tried to focus on the task at hand, tried to remember that my daughter needed to be washed and dried and read to and tucked in, that whatever earthquake was happening in my personal life could wait until she was safely dreaming of dinosaurs and adventures. 5 minutes later, I was wrapping Wren in her unicorn towel, the one with the purple horn that Rachel had bought during her last healthy summer, when my phone buzzed again. The sound cut through the bathroom's humid air like a blade. I froze. Wren wiggled in my arms, trying to escape toward her bedroom in the pajamas waiting there. My eyes drifted to the counter. The screen glowed with a new notification. "Vivian has sent you a message." I carried Wren to her room first. Got her into her dinosaur pajamas, the ones with the tiny triceratops pattern that she refused to let me wash because she was convinced they would fade. Brushed her teeth. Answered her 17 questions about whether dinosaurs had belly buttons. Only when she was finally settled under her covers, her worn triceratops plush tucked under her arm, did I allow myself to return to the bathroom and retrieve my phone. My hands trembled as I opened the message. The words on the screen were casual, almost playful, and that somehow made them worse. "Well, this is unexpected. Dinner tomorrow. I know a place called the Dino Den where they make dinosaur-shaped pancakes for dinner. Bring Wren. I would love to meet her." I read those sentences 4 times. She knew my daughter's name. Of course she did. It was on my profile right there next to the photograph of Wren and me at the Denver Zoo, her face painted like a raptor, my expression exhausted but happy. I had written in my bio that I was a package deal, that anyone interested in me needed to understand that my daughter came first, that I was still healing, but ready to create new joy. I had been honest in a way that had scared off most of my matches within the first few messages. But Vivian had not been scared. Vivian had read those words and responded with an invitation that included my child. I typed and deleted 4 different responses before settling on the one that felt least likely to destroy my career. I am flattered, but I have to say no. Simple, direct, professional. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then sat down on the edge of the bathtub and stared at the ceiling while my pulse slowly returned to something approaching normal. The thing about grief is that it does not follow a schedule. It does not care about your carefully constructed routines or your attempts to rebuild a functional life. It ambushes you in bathtubs and grocery stores and parent-teacher conferences, reminds you that the person you loved most in the world is gone, and that you are now navigating everything alone. 18 months before that fateful dating app match, I had been a different man entirely. Nathan Calloway, advertising copywriter husband, to Rachel father to 3-year-old Wren owner of a comfortable suburban existence that I had assumed would last forever. Rachel had started complaining about headaches in February. Nothing dramatic at first, just a persistent ache behind her eyes that she attributed to the stress of teaching third grade during flu season. She had always been the stronger one, the person who pushed through discomfort without complaint. So when she finally agreed to see a doctor in April, I knew something was wrong. The family physician prescribed rest and ibuprofen. The headaches continued. In May, she collapsed in her classroom during a math lesson, frightening her students and summoning an ambulance that carried her to Denver General, while I raced across town with our daughter in the back seat, asking why mommy was not answering her phone. The diagnosis arrived like a verdict: glioblastoma multiforme stage 4, aggressive and advanced. The oncologist, a man with kind eyes and a gentle voice that could not soften the devastation of his words, explained that the tumor had been growing for months, perhaps years, hidden in the eloquent tissue of her brain until it had grown large enough to make itself known. Surgery could buy time, but not victory. Chemotherapy might extend her prognosis from months to perhaps a year. Rachel had looked at me across the sterile expanse of the hospital room, our daughter asleep in my lap, and spoken with the quiet courage that had always defined her. I want every day I can get with her, whatever it takes. She lasted 5 months, 5 months of treatments that stole her hair and her appetite and her energy, but never her spirit. 5 months of making memories with Ren, of filling journals with letters our daughter would someday read, of teaching me how to braid hair and pack lunches and answer impossible questions about life and death with something approaching grace. 5 months of watching the woman I loved disappear piece by piece while I stood helpless beside her bed holding her hand, promising that Ren would know how much her mother loved her. The funeral was held on a gray October morning. Ren wore a black dress and clutched her Triceratops toy and asked me in a voice that still haunts my dreams when mommy was coming home. I did not have an answer then. I am not sure I have one now. The first year after Rachel's death passed in a blur of survival. I took a leave of absence from my job, unable to focus on taglines and marketing campaigns when my entire world had crumbled into dust. My parents, Grace and Walter, welcomed Ren and me into their Denver home with open arms and endless patience. My father, a retired carpenter with hands that had built furniture for 3 generations, said little but did much fixing leaky faucets and assembling the toddler bed Ren had outgrown, and sitting with me in silence on the back porch while I stared at nothing and tried to remember how to breathe. My mother, a former teacher herself, filled the gaps I could not manage reading to Ren when I was too exhausted cooking meals I barely tasted, gently pushing me to shower and shave, and remember that my daughter needed her father present, not just physically there. Gradually, painfully, we found our footing. Ren started preschool. I started sleeping more than 3 hours at a time. The grief did not lessen exactly, but it changed shape, became something I could carry rather than something that crushed me. And then my savings account, depleted by medical bills and funeral costs, and the expense of simply existing, forced me to acknowledge that I could not hide forever. I needed to work. I needed to provide. I needed to find a job that would accommodate the reality of single parenthood while still paying enough to keep a roof over our heads. A former colleague mentioned an opening at Sterling and Associates, a mid-sized marketing agency across town, with a reputation for creative excellence and crucially for treating its employees like human beings rather than expendable resources. I submitted my resume with minimal expectations. 2 days later, I received a call inviting me to interview with the marketing director. Vivian Mercer was not what I had expected. She was younger than me by several years, early 30s at most, with the kind of polished presence that suggested expensive education and ruthless ambition. Industry gossip painted her as brilliant, but cold, the youngest marketing director in the company's history, a woman who had clawed her way to the top through sheer talent and an apparent indifference to office politics. She had reviewed my resume with an expression that gave nothing away, her eyes scanning the gap in my employment history like a surgeon examining an x-ray. Her voice had been cool, but not unkind. I see you took 8 months off between positions, Mr. Calloway. May I ask about that? I had prepared for this question, had rehearsed answers that were professional and sanitized, and revealed nothing of the devastation behind the dates. But something in her steady gaze made me abandon the script. My wife passed away 18 months ago. Brain tumor. I took time to help my daughter adjust and to get my own head straight. The words came out rougher than I intended, stripped of the careful polish I usually apply to discussions of Rachel's death. Vivian's professional demeanor shifted almost imperceptibly. Her pen paused, Her eyes, which had been assessing, became something closer to human. I am sorry for your loss. That must be incredibly difficult. I waited for the pity for the awkward condolences that people offered when they did not know what else to say. Instead, she straightened the papers in front of her and moved forward without missing a beat. Tell me how you would manage client deadlines while balancing your responsibilities as a single parent. That question changed everything. She did not treat me as fragile or damaged or less capable because tragedy had touched my life. She acknowledged my reality and then asked practically and directly whether I could do the job. I answered honestly. I explained that Ren attended preschool until 3 o'clock, that I had reliable backup in my parents, that I worked best in focused bursts rather than marathon sessions, that I would need flexibility but would repay it with results. She listened without interruption, made notes on her legal pad, and asked follow-up questions that proved she was actually processing my answers rather than simply waiting for me to finish. The offer came 2 days later. Flexible hours that accommodated Ren's preschool schedule. The option to work from home 2 days per week. A salary slightly lower than my previous position, but paired with benefits that made up the difference. I accepted before she finished explaining the terms, and I nearly cried with relief when I hung up the phone. For 6 months, Vivian had been the consummate professional boss. Demanding but fair, exacting but not unreasonable. She pushed me to produce my best work while respecting the boundaries I had established, never scheduling meetings during pickup time, never questioning when I had to leave early for a parent-teacher conference, never making me feel like my parenting responsibilities were an inconvenience to be tolerated, rather than a reality to be accommodated. The office rumor mill painted her as aloof and intensely private, someone who shared nothing of her personal life with colleagues. I had never seen her as anything other than my supervisor, until her face appeared on my dating app. My phone buzzed again that night after Ren was asleep, after I had poured myself a drink I barely touched and sat on the couch in our small apartment, trying to process what had happened. Vivian's response to my rejection was waiting on the screen. I respect that. See you at tomorrow's client meeting. That was all. No awkwardness, no pressing for explanations, no wounded ego demanding to know why I had said no, just professional acknowledgement and a reminder that we had work to do. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt something complicated and unwelcome stirring in my chest, a mixture of disappointment and respect and confusion that I was not ready to examine too closely. Sleep came fitfully that night. I dreamed of Rachel, as I often did, but this time she was standing in Vivian's office, arranging flowers on the desk, smiling at me with that knowing expression she had always worn when she could see through my denials. When I woke, the dream evaporated, leaving only a lingering sense of permission I was not sure how to interpret. The next morning brought a knot of anxiety that settled in my stomach during the drive to Ren's preschool and tightened with every mile that brought me closer to Sterling and Associates. Would things be awkward had I jeopardized my position by rejecting her? Should I have explained my reasons more clearly? The questions circled like vultures as I parked in my usual spot and walked through the glass doors into the lobby, bracing myself for whatever awaited. The morning client meeting was for Whitmore Industries, a manufacturing company looking to rebrand their consumer division. Vivian ran the presentation with her usual efficiency, her voice crisp and confident as she walked the clients through our proposed strategy. She did not glance at me differently, did not avoid my eyes, did not treat me with unusual coldness or unusual warmth. If anything, she seemed more relaxed than usual, approving my copy concepts with minimal revisions, and even turning to the clients at one point to offer praise that caught me off guard. Nathan's approach here captures exactly what Whitmore needs: authentic, not manufactured. Your customers want to feel like they are buying from people who understand their values, and this campaign delivers that without pandering. I felt Bradley Haynes stiffen in the chair beside me. Bradley was the senior copywriter at Sterling, 4 years with the company, a man who had enjoyed Vivian's favor before my arrival, and who had watched his preferred status erode with every project I completed successfully. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly at her words, and I filed away the observation for later consideration. The meeting concluded, the clients departed with handshakes and promises to review the materials. The team began gathering their things, ready to scatter back to their respective desks. I was halfway to the door when Vivian's voice stopped me. "Nathan, could you stay behind for a moment?" The others filtered out without comment, though Bradley shot me a glance that I could not quite read as he passed. The conference room door clicked shut, leaving Vivian and me alone in the glass-walled space. The city of Denver spread out beyond the windows, like a promise I was not sure I could keep. Her voice was matter-of-fact when she spoke, the same tone she might use to discuss quarterly projections or campaign timelines. About last night, I want to assure you that your response will not affect our professional relationship in any way. My shoulders dropped with the relief I had not realized I was holding. I appreciate that. I should explain my reasons. She raised a hand, cutting me off before I could dig myself into a hole of awkward justifications. You do not owe me an explanation, Nathan. Dating apps are strange territory. I am your supervisor, and that creates an inherent power imbalance. Your no was completely appropriate. It was the right call. Her frankness disarmed me. I had expected tension, subtle recriminations, the kind of professional frost that could make a workplace unbearable. Instead, she was acknowledging the awkwardness head-on and then dismissing it, clearing the air, with the same efficiency she brought to everything else. Thank you for understanding, I managed. She began gathering her papers, stacking them with the precise movements of someone who valued order in all things. That said, I do have a question that is not related to dating or our work relationship. I tensed again, unsure what new territory we were about to enter. The dinosaur pancake place I mentioned in my message. It is called the Dino Den. My nephew Oliver loves it, and I noticed from your profile that Ren is into dinosaurs. Whether or not we ever socialize outside of work, I thought you might want to take her there sometime. She slid a business card across the conference table toward me. It was colorful, cheerful, featuring a cartoon brachiosaurus made of pancake batter. They do not advertise much, but they do amazing things with breakfast food. Then she was gone, striding out of the conference room with her heels clicking against the floor, leaving me alone with a business card and a suggestion, and the peculiar feeling that Vivian Mercer was far more complicated than the office rumors suggested. That evening, Ren and I sat at our small kitchen table, eating the macaroni and cheese that had become our default dinner on nights when my energy ran low. She was chattering about her day, about the games she had played at preschool, about how Miss Prentice had shown them pictures of butterflies and let them color their own. I listened with half my attention, the other half still circling the conversation with Vivian, trying to parse its meaning and coming up empty. Hey, Ren Bear, I interrupted during a pause in her monologue. How would you feel about trying a new restaurant this weekend? They make pancakes that look like dinosaurs. Her reaction was instantaneous and electric. Her eyes went wide, her fork clattered against her plate, and she practically vibrated off her chair with excitement. Real dinosaurs. I smiled despite myself. Pancake dinosaurs, but I hear they are pretty impressive. Can we go tomorrow? It is a school night, sweetheart. How about Saturday for lunch? She considered this compromise with the gravity of a 4-year-old weighing matters of supreme importance. Okay, but we have to go right when they open so we can get the best dinosaurs. Deal. She stabbed a macaroni noodle with renewed enthusiasm, then paused, her expression shifting in that mercurial way children have sunshine to clouds in the space of a heartbeat. Daddy is mommy in heaven, eating dinosaur pancakes. The question hit me like a physical blow. These moments still caught me off guard, the sudden pivots from joy to grief that were simply part of life with a child who had lost her mother too young. I set down my own fork and reached across the table to take her small hand in mine. I bet if they have dinosaur pancakes in heaven, she is definitely eating them. And she is thinking about you while she does. Ren nodded, satisfied with this answer, in the way only children can be, accepting the impossible as perfectly reasonable because the adult they trusted had told them so. Good. Mommy really liked pancakes. She did. I agreed, my throat tight. She really did. We finished dinner in comfortable silence, the weight of loss settling around us like a familiar blanket. Later, as I was cleaning the dishes, Ren tugged at my sleeve with a question in her eyes. Daddy, can your friend come with us to the dinosaur place? I frowned. What friend, sweetheart? The lady in the picture on your phone, the one that made you make a funny face. I nearly dropped the plate I was rinsing. My daughter, who noticed everything, who cataloged the world with the relentless curiosity of her age, had apparently seen me staring at Vivian's dating profile with an expression memorable enough to warrant comment. That is Miss Mercer Wren. She is my boss at work, not my friend. Ren shrugged with the devastating simplicity of four-year-old logic. She can still eat pancakes. I had no argument for that. Saturday arrived with Ren bouncing out of bed at an hour that should have been illegal, already dressed in her favorite dinosaur shirt and demanding to know if it was pancake time yet. We compromised on breakfast at home first, then drove across town to the Dino Den just as they were opening their doors. Ren clutched her beloved Triceratops plush against her chest, her face pressed to the car window as we pulled into the parking lot. Her voice a continuous stream of excited observations about the dinosaur decorations visible through the restaurant's windows. The inside exceeded every expectation. Prehistoric murals covered every wall, depicting Jurassic landscapes populated by creatures that would have terrified and delighted in equal measure. The servers wore safari outfits complete with khaki vests and pith helmets, and they greeted each young customer with enthusiasm that felt genuine rather than forced. The menu featured items with names like Raptor Wraps, T-Rex Toast, and Bronto Burgers, each description accompanied by cartoon illustrations that made Ren gasp with delight. We found a booth shaped like a cave entrance and settled in to study our options. Ren did not need long to decide. Stegosaurus Pancake Daddy, with the chocolate chip plates and strawberry spikes. That is what I want. When the server brought her order, my daughter's face transformed. The joy that spread across her features was a light I had not seen since before Rachel's diagnosis, a pure and uncomplicated happiness that reminded me why I kept fighting, kept getting up every morning, kept trying to build something worth living for. She stared at the pancake like it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen, which perhaps it was. Daddy, take a picture to show Miss Mercer. She needs to know it is the best pancake ever. I was reaching for my phone, prepared to capture the moment, while silently planning to never actually send it to my boss when a familiar voice spoke from somewhere behind me. I am glad you approve, Ren. My hand froze. My heart stopped. I turned slowly, already knowing what I would find. Vivian stood there in jeans and a casual gray sweater, so different from her office attire that she might have been a different person entirely. Her hair was down, falling past her shoulders in waves I had never seen before. And beside her, clutching her hand with the fierce grip of a shy child in a crowded place, stood a boy about Ren's age. He wore glasses that seemed slightly too large for his face and held a Velociraptor action figure like it was a lifeline. Vivian's expression held genuine surprise, tinged with something that might have been embarrassment. I swear I did not know you would be here. I bring Oliver every other Saturday. It is part of my sister's visitation arrangement. The boy Oliver was staring at the dinosaur decorations with undisguised wonder, his earlier shyness temporarily forgotten in the face of prehistoric splendor. Ren had already noticed him, had already zeroed in on the Velociraptor in his hand with the laser focus of a child who has discovered a potential ally or adversary. I found my voice somewhere in the chaos of my thoughts. Small world. It is, Vivian agreed. The restaurant was filling up around us, families streaming through the doors, the noise level rising. Would you mind if we joined you? The place is getting crowded, and Oliver seems to have found a worthy opponent. I should have said no, should have maintained the professional boundaries that existed for good reason. Instead, I looked at my daughter, who was already waving at Oliver with the enthusiasm of someone who has just discovered a new best friend, and I gestured to the empty seats at our table. What happened next was something I could not have predicted and could not have scripted. Ren slid out of her seat before I could stop her and marched directly up to Oliver, her Triceratops plush extended like an offering. I am Ren. Do you like Triceratops? They are the best dinosaurs because they have 3 horns and they can charge at anything. Oliver pushed his glasses up his nose and studied her with the serious expression of someone evaluating a complex problem. His voice when he finally spoke was soft but certain. Velociraptors are better. They are smart and fast, and they hunt in packs. Ren's eyes narrowed with the competitive fire of a 4-year-old presented with a challenge. Nuh-uh. Triceratops have armor, and their horns can poke anything. Velociraptors have claws that can cut through bone. And just like that, they were off engaged in the ancient debate of dinosaur superiority that has consumed children since the first plastic figurine emerged from a toy factory. They migrated to the booth together, still arguing, sliding into adjacent seats as if they had known each other for years rather than seconds. Vivian and I exchanged a glance that held equal parts amusement and bewilderment, then took our own seats on the opposite side. The breakfast that followed was not what I had expected from a Saturday morning with my daughter. The children maintained their passionate debate while demolishing their respective pancakes, pausing only to demonstrate proper dinosaur roars or to cite facts they had gleaned from library books and museum visits. Oliver, who had started the meal barely speaking above a whisper, gradually grew more animated as Wren drew him out with her relentless energy. By the time the plates were cleared, he was laughing at her exaggerated triceratops stomp and offering to teach her the velociraptor hunting call. Vivian watched them with an expression I had never seen on her face at work. Soft, unguarded, almost vulnerable. She cut Oliver's pancake into smaller pieces without being asked, wiped syrup from his chin, with the easy competence of someone who had done this many times before, listened to his contributions to the dinosaur debate with the kind of focused attention she usually reserved for client presentations. "It is why I understood your need for flexibility," she said during a lull in the children's conversation. "Childcare is not just a women's issue. Companies need to recognize that fathers are just as involved in raising children as mothers." I considered her words while Wren demonstrated the proper technique for a triceratops charge. "That is a surprisingly progressive stance for someone in your position." "Why says it?" She tilted her head slightly. "Most of my previous employers acted like having responsibilities outside work was a personal failing. It cost them talented people who simply could not pretend their families did not exist." "Mine too," I admitted. "My last job made it clear that single parenthood was an inconvenience they did not want to accommodate." Vivian's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Then they were idiots. You are one of our most productive copywriters, and your work has improved our client retention rate by 12% in 6 months. Your parenting has not hindered your performance. If anything, it has made you more efficient with the time you have." The compliment caught me off guard. I had grown accustomed to Vivian's professional assessments in the office, her brief nods of approval and occasional suggestions for improvement. But this was different, more personal. An acknowledgement that she had been paying attention not just to my output, but to the circumstances that shaped it. I found myself studying her as she interacted with Oliver, cataloging the differences between this version of Vivian and the polished marketing director I knew from the office. Here, in the chaos of a dinosaur-themed restaurant, surrounded by shrieking children and harried parents, she seemed more human, approachable, real. "Can I ask you something?" The question escaped before I could think better of it. She looked up from helping Oliver pour syrup without creating a disaster. "Go ahead. Why did you swipe right on my profile, the real reason?" The noise of the restaurant seemed to recede. Wren and Oliver were still debating the relative merits of herbivores versus carnivores, their voices rising and falling with passionate conviction. Vivian glanced at them to ensure they were absorbed in their conversation before answering. "Honestly, I recognized you immediately. My first instinct was to swipe left to avoid exactly the situation we are in right now." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But then I read your profile. What you wrote about wanting to find someone who would understand you are a package deal with Wren, about still healing but being ready to create new joy. It was honest in a way dating profiles rarely are." I remembered writing those words late one night after my third failed attempt at dating. Women who had seemed interested until they learned I had a daughter. Women who wanted spontaneous weekends away and could not understand why I would not introduce them to Wren after just a few dates. Women who saw my grief as baggage rather than evidence that I knew how to love deeply. I had written that profile in frustration and exhaustion, never expecting anyone to actually read it with understanding. "And then I asked you out." Vivian continued, her voice quieter now, which was completely inappropriate given our professional relationship. "You were right to say no. It was not just the work thing," I heard myself admit. She waited, not pressing, giving me space to continue a retreat. "It is complicated," I finally managed. "Parenting grief, trying to figure out who I am now that Rachel is gone. I do not know how to add anything else to that equation." Vivian nodded slowly. "Parenting always is complicated. For what it is worth, you are doing a remarkable job with Wren. She is wonderful." "Thank you." I watched my daughter demonstrate the proper Triceratops roar to an impressed Oliver, their earlier debate temporarily set aside in favor of collaboration. Your nephew is pretty great too. Something in Vivian's expression shifted, became more open than I had ever seen. He is the best thing in my life. After my sister's divorce turned ugly 2 years ago, Oliver stopped talking for almost 6 months. Completely nonverbal. Therapists, specialists, nothing worked. He just retreated inside himself and would not come out. What brought him back? She smiled, a genuine warmth transforming her face. Dinosaurs. One day he whispered raptor when he wanted something. Just that one word, barely audible. And we built from there, one word at a time, dinosaur by dinosaur. The vulnerability in that admission changed something between us. For the first time, I saw Vivian not as my intimidating boss or a potential complication, but as another adult navigating the complicated responsibility of caring for a child who had experienced trauma. We were not so different, really, both trying to help damaged children find their way back to joy, both using whatever tools we could find, even if those tools happened to be prehistoric creatures made of pancake batter. When the children finished their food and began showing signs of restlessness, Vivian suggested the park across the street. They can run off the sugar while we have coffee, unless you have other plans. I did not have other plans, and Ren was already begging to show Oliver the proper way to stomp, like a triceratops, so the decision essentially made itself. We spent 2 hours at that park watching the children race around the playground equipment with the boundless energy unique to their age. Oliver emerged further from his shell, with every passing minute his initial whispers giving way to excited declarations about dinosaur facts and playground strategy. Ren, never one to cede the spotlight, matched him observation for observation. The two of them engaged in a constant exchange of information and imagination. Vivian and I sat on a bench with takeaway coffee cups and conversation that carefully avoided both work topics and anything that might veer into dating territory. We talked about parenting challenges, about sleepless nights, about the particular exhaustion that comes from being the sole adult responsible for a small human's well-being. We talked about Denver, about favorite restaurants and hiking trails and the neighborhoods where we lived. We talked about everything except the dating app match that had brought us here and the professional boundaries that still existed between us. When Oliver began showing signs of fatigue, yawning between sentences and leaning against his aunt's leg, Vivian checked her watch. We should get going. I promised Oliver we would video call his mom tonight. I called Ren over from the slide where she had been perfecting her dinosaur landing technique. Time to head home, Ren Bear. Say goodbye to Oliver and Miss Mercer. Ren's face crumpled briefly with the disappointment unique to children being separated from new friends. Then she threw her arms around Oliver in a dramatic hug that made him stiffen with surprise before tentatively hugging back. Next time I will bring my dinosaur book to prove Triceratops are the best. Oliver adjusted his glasses with the serious expression of someone accepting a challenge. I have a bigger book with more velociraptors. You will see. As the children exchanged their dinosaur-centered goodbyes, Vivian turned to me. This was nice, Nathan. Unexpected but nice. It was. I agreed, and I was surprised to find I meant it. See you Monday. She seemed suddenly uncertain, a crack in the professional armor she usually wore. Of course, the Whitmore revisions, right? She nodded, her corporate persona sliding back into place like a shield. Have a good weekend. We walked to our separate cars, Ren chattering the entire way about Oliver and dinosaurs, and when we could go back to the dino den. I buckled her into her car seat and answered her questions with half my attention, the other half still processing everything that had happened. Daddy, is Vivian your girlfriend now? I nearly dropped my keys. No, sweetheart. She is my boss at work. But she can be your friend too, right? Like how Miss Prentice is my teacher and my friend. Children and their simple wisdom. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking space. I suppose she could be. Good. Ren hugged her Triceratops plush against her chest. Because Oliver said they go to the dinosaur place a lot, and I want to go again. That night, after Ren was asleep, I found myself sitting on the couch, staring at the Kindred app on my phone. Vivian and I were still matched, our brief conversation preserved in the message history. My finger hovered over the unmatched button, the sensible choice that would eliminate any further complications. Instead, I typed a message. Ren had a great time today. Thank you for the recommendation. She is already planning her dinosaur debate strategy for a rematch with Oliver. I hit send before I could overthink it, then set the phone aside and began folding the laundry that had been accumulating all week. 10 minutes later, the chime of an incoming message pulled me back. Vivian had replied, "Oliver has been researching Velociraptor facts since we got home. I think your daughter has awakened his competitive spirit. It is the most animated I have seen him in months." I smiled despite myself and typed back, "Ren made me read her Triceratops book twice at bedtime. I think we are in for an epic dinosaur showdown." Her response came quickly. "Poor us. Caught in the crossfire of prehistoric warfare." The conversation continued for over an hour, carefully skirting anything work-related or overtly personal, focusing instead on the children and their newfound friendship. It was easy, comfortable, a connection I had not experienced since Rachel, and that thought brought a wave of guilt I was not quite prepared to examine. Eventually, the messages tapered off with mutual acknowledgments that sleep was necessary for functioning adults. I set my phone on the nightstand and lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, wondering what I was doing and whether I was capable of stopping. Monday morning brought a return to normalcy that felt almost surreal after the weekend. Vivian ran the team meeting with her usual efficiency, her voice crisp and commanding as she outlined deadlines and expectations. I presented my copy revisions without any indication that we had spent Saturday afternoon watching our children debate prehistoric zoology. If anyone noticed anything different in our interaction, they did not mention it. But Bradley Haynes was watching. I caught him studying me during the meeting, his expression calculating rather than hostile. Caught him glancing between Vivian and me with the focused attention of someone assembling pieces of a puzzle. After the meeting dispersed, I saw him huddled with another colleague by the coffee machine, their voices too low to hear, but their body language suggesting gossip in progress. I filed the observation away and returned to my desk, trying to focus on the Whitmore campaign revisions that needed completion by Thursday. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother asking about dinner on Sunday. Then another buzz, this time from Vivian. "Oliver wants to know if Ren has practiced her Triceratops charge. He is concerned she might have improved." I should not have smiled at that, should not have felt the warmth that spread through my chest at the casual intimacy of the message, should not have typed back, "Tell him she has been practicing all morning. He should be worried." But I did all of those things, and I knew even then that the careful boundaries I had constructed around my life were beginning to develop cracks. The question was whether I would repair them or let them crumble entirely. My phone buzzed again, but this time I let it wait, returning my attention to the work that paid my bills and kept my daughter fed. Some decisions could not be rushed. Some paths needed to be walked slowly, one careful step at a time. And some walls I was beginning to suspect were meant to come down. The pattern established itself with the inevitability of water finding its path downhill. 3 weeks after that first accidental encounter at the Dino Den, Vivian and I had developed an unspoken routine that neither of us acknowledged directly. Saturday mornings found us at the same restaurant, our children already waving to each other across the parking lot before we had even unbuckled their car seats. The Children's Museum of Denver became our second territory, Oliver leading Ren through the dinosaur exhibits with the proprietary pride of someone showing off their kingdom. Washington Park hosted our afternoon excursions, the children racing across the grass while we followed at a more measured pace, our conversations carefully constrained to neutral topics. We were not dating. That was what I told myself during the quiet hours after Ren fell asleep, when the apartment felt too large and too empty, and my phone glowed with Vivian's latest message about Oliver's newest dinosaur obsession. We were facilitating a friendship between children who needed each other. The fact that we texted every night, that I found myself checking for her messages during meetings, that her laugh had become something I looked forward to hearing, those were incidental details. Complications I was not ready to name. At the office, nothing changed. Vivian remained my professional superior, demanding excellence and accepting nothing less. I remained her employee, meeting deadlines and exceeding expectations with the focused determination of someone who had too much to lose. If our colleagues noticed the way we avoided each other's eyes during presentations or the careful distance we maintained in hallways, no one mentioned it. No one except Bradley Haynes. I caught him watching me during the Morrison automotive crisis, meeting his expression, calculating as Vivian outlined the emergency we were facing. Morrison had been a sterling client for 3 years, a $2 million account that represented a significant portion of our revenue. Their CEO had called that morning with an ultimatum that sent ripples of panic through the executive floor. Vivian's voice carried the controlled tension of someone managing a disaster. Their last three campaigns have not moved the needle on market share. They are considering taking the account to Blackwell Creative unless we can demonstrate a fundamentally different approach by Friday. The conference room fell silent. Bradley shifted in his seat, already preparing the pitch. He had been polishing for weeks. His ideas were solid, competent, exactly what Morrison had seen before in different packaging. I could predict every word before he opened his mouth. But something in the client brief nagged at me, a detail that did not align with the strategy we had been pursuing. I pulled up the demographic data on my laptop while Bradley launched into his presentation, scrolling through numbers that painted a different picture than the one our campaigns had been targeting. Bradley's voice droned on about brand positioning and premium messaging, the same approach that had failed to connect for 3 consecutive quarters. I found what I was looking for buried in a market research appendix, a statistic that changed everything. My interruption cut across Bradley's rehearsed rhythm. The problem is not the campaigns, it is the targeting. Every head in the room turned toward me. Bradley's expression soured with barely concealed irritation. Vivian's gaze sharpened with interest. I pulled the data onto the conference room screen. Morrison has been positioning themselves as an exclusive luxury brand, but 68% of their actual buyers are first-time luxury customers. They are not buying from Morrison because they identify with the elite lifestyle we have been selling. They are buying because they finally earned enough to afford something nice, and Morrison happened to be accessible enough to feel achievable. The silence stretched. Bradley opened his mouth to object, but Vivian raised a hand to stop him. Continue. I stood, moving to the screen where the numbers told their story. We have been making first-time buyers feel like imposters in a club that does not want them. Every ad says Morrison is for people who have always had money, but our actual customers are people who just got money. They do not want to be talked down to. They want to feel like they have arrived. I could see the understanding dawning on Vivian's face, the recognition of an insight that had eluded all of us for months. What do you propose? The tagline came to me, fully formed, a phrase that captured everything Morrison needed to say. Your first Morrison, not your last. A campaign about welcoming new customers into the family instead of making them feel like they are pretending to belong somewhere they do not. Bradley's jaw tightened. The other team members exchanged glances that ranged from impressed to uncomfortable. Vivian studied me with an expression I could not quite read. Develop it. Full presentation by Thursday morning. Nathan leads, everyone else supports. Bradley's protest came immediately. I have been working on the Morrison account for 2 years. This is a completely different direction without any testing or validation. Vivian's response was measured but final. And in those 2 years, we have lost 12% of their market share. Different is exactly what they need. She turned to me with something that might have been respect or might have been recognition of a kindred mind. Expensive does not mean exclusive. Sometimes the best luxury is making someone feel like they belong. Make that the foundation. The meeting dispersed with assignments and deadlines, but Bradley lingered near my desk long enough to deliver a message his expression had already telegraphed. Careful, Calloway. Rising stars have a way of burning out around here. I watched him walk away and filed his warning under threats that might become problems. The Morrison presentation on Thursday was a success that rippled through Sterling's hierarchy. The client responded to the new approach with enthusiasm that bordered on relief, signing an expanded contract before they left the building. Andrew Sterling, the company's founder and CEO, stopped by my desk personally to offer congratulations that felt genuine rather than obligatory. But success brought attention, and attention brought scrutiny. Patricia Brennan summoned me to her office the following Monday with a request that carried the weight of institutional authority. The HR director's space was efficient and neutral, designed to put visitors at ease while maintaining professional distance. The chair she gestured toward was comfortable, but positioned to remind occupants they were being evaluated. Her voice was calm, measured, the tone of someone who had conducted hundreds of these conversations. Mr. Calloway, I have received some concerns about your professional relationship with Ms. Mercer. My stomach dropped even as my expression remained composed. What kind of concerns? Allegations of favoritism, possibly more. She studied me with eyes that gave nothing away. I am not accusing you of anything. I am simply asking if there is anything I should know. The truth felt like a minefield I had to navigate with precision. We have encountered each other a few times outside work. Our children, my daughter and her nephew, have become friends. But nothing romantic has happened between us. Patricia made a note on her legal pad. In the recent project assignment, Morrison Automotive, I proposed an approach that the client responded to positively. Ms. Mercer assigned me to lead because she believed my strategy had merit. If you review her performance assessments of my work, you will find she has actually been harder on my submissions than anyone else on the team. Something flickered across Patricia's expression, an acknowledgement that my claim could be verified. I will be reviewing the relevant documentation. For your sake, and Miss Mercer's, I hope the picture is as clear as you suggest. The meeting ended with professional handshakes and unspoken warnings. I returned to my desk with the uncomfortable awareness that our carefully maintained boundaries had attracted exactly the kind of attention we had been trying to avoid. That Sunday, my mother arrived early for dinner with the particular energy she brought to interventions disguised as casual visits. My father followed with his usual quiet presence, settling into the living room with the newspaper, while Grace took command of my small kitchen. Wren provided inadvertent ammunition the moment Grace asked about her week. The words tumbled out in an excited stream. And then Oliver showed me the new dinosaur book his aunt got him, and it has pictures of the meteor that killed all the dinosaurs, and Vivian said maybe we could go see real fossils at the museum, and Oliver is teaching me how to do the velociraptor call, and Grace's eyebrow rose with the practiced skill of a mother who had raised 3 children and knew when she was being presented with significant information. She turned to me while Wren continued her recitation to my father, her voice pitched low enough for privacy. Wren talks about Oliver and Vivian constantly. When do I get to meet these people who have become such fixtures in your lives? I concentrated on the vegetables I was chopping with unnecessary precision. They are not fixtures, Mom. Oliver is Wren's friend. Vivian is his aunt and my boss. A boss who spends weekends with you and Wren. The statement carried no judgment, only observation. We are facilitating the children's friendship. Nothing more. Grace hummed with the skepticism of someone who had seen through my deflections since childhood. And how often do you text this friendship-facilitating boss of yours? I did not answer. The silence stretched between us, filled with the sounds of Wren's continued narration and my father's occasional murmurs of interest. My father's voice cut through from the living room, quiet but carrying. The question is not whether you will get hurt again, son. The question is whether you will let fear make your decisions for you. I set down the knife, suddenly unable to continue the pretense of normal dinner preparation. Wren has already lost one mother figure. I cannot introduce someone new into her life unless I am absolutely certain they will stay. Grace moved beside me, her hand finding mine with the gentle pressure of maternal understanding. Honey, there are no certainties in life. Rachel taught us that in the cruelest way possible. But from what you have told me, from what Wren clearly feels, this Vivian is already in your daughter's life. The question is whether you are going to acknowledge what is happening or continue pretending these Saturday meetings are coincidental. The words stayed with me long after my parents left that evening. As I tucked Wren into bed, she clutched her Triceratops plush and asked the question that finally broke through my resistance. Daddy, can Oliver and Vivian come to my birthday party next month? I smoothed the hair from her forehead. Would that make you happy, Wren Bear? She nodded with the emphatic certainty of childhood. Oliver told me he has never been to a birthday party because the other kids at his school think he is weird. But I do not think he is weird. He just knows a lot about dinosaurs, and knowing things is not weird. My chest tightened with an emotion I could not quite name. Then we will definitely invite them. The next morning I stopped by Vivian's office before the daily team meeting. Her door was open. Her attention focused on documents spread across her desk with the intensity she brought to everything. She looked up at my knock, her expression shifting from professional concentration to something more guarded. Do you have a minute? She gestured to the chair across from her, the same seat where I had sat during my job interview nearly a year ago. What can I do for you? Wren's birthday is next month, nothing elaborate, just cake and games in the backyard with some children from her preschool. She would like Oliver to come. I paused, crossing a threshold I could not uncross. And you, of course. Something moved behind her eyes, a reaction she controlled before it could fully form. That is very kind. I am sure Oliver would be thrilled. It is on the 17th. I will text you the details. I stood to leave, then stopped at the door with a question that had been building since that first Saturday at the Dino Den. Vivian, why did you ask me out that night on the app? The real reason. She set down her pen, considering me with an expression that balanced vulnerability against professional caution. Because for 6 months, I had watched you balance being an excellent father and a talented copywriter with grace and humor despite your grief. Because you made me laugh during meetings when you did not realize I was listening. Because I had never met anyone who cared so deeply about doing the right thing even when it was difficult. She took a breath, the pause of someone stepping off a cliff. And because I thought if I ever decided to let someone into Oliver's life, I would want it to be someone like you. The honesty of her answer left me without words. I had expected deflection, professional distance, some rationalization that would make the situation simpler to navigate. Instead, she had handed me the truth like a gift I was not sure I deserved. And when I said no, I respected your boundaries. I still do. I nodded slowly, feeling the shape of something changing between us. What if I told you those boundaries might be shifting? Hope flickered in her eyes, careful and contained. I would say that is something we should discuss outside the office. Dinner Friday, just the two of us. No children, no dinosaur-shaped food. Her smile was the genuine one, not the professional mask she wore in meetings. I would like that very much. Friday arrived with the nervous anticipation I had not experienced since my early dates with Rachel. The restaurant was a small Italian place, recommended by a colleague, intimate without being oppressive, the kind of establishment where conversation could flow without the pressure of elaborate atmospheres. Vivian arrived in a dress I had never seen, her hair loose around her shoulders, the transformation from corporate Vivian to this softer version still catching me off guard. We ordered wine and appetizers and talked about everything except work and children. She described her path through corporate marketing, the sacrifices and strategic maneuvering that had carried her to her current position. I shared stories from my previous career, the campaigns I was proud of, and the ones that had taught me humility. We discovered shared opinions about films and divergent tastes in music and a mutual appreciation for hiking trails within driving distance of Denver. Halfway through the main course, Vivian's expression shifted to something more serious. I should tell you something about why I am the way I am at work. I waited, sensing this was a confession she had been building toward. I was engaged once 4 years ago. His name was Marcus. She traced the rim of her wine glass without drinking. He was a good man, patient, kind, everything I should have wanted. And I drove him away because I could not stop working long enough to be present in my own relationship. What happened? Her laugh held no humor. I was so focused on making partner at my old firm that I forgot Marcus existed for days at a time. Canceled dinners, missed anniversaries, took calls during date nights. He did not leave because he stopped loving me. He left because he said I was not there, even when I was sitting across from him. I recognized the pain beneath her matter-of-fact delivery, the self-recrimination of someone who had learned from failure. That sounds difficult. The worst part is that he was right. I still do not know how to turn it off, this drive to prove myself, to succeed, to be the best at everything I do. My sister calls me emotionally unavailable. She is probably right too. Vivian finally met my eyes. I am warning you now, Nathan. I am not good at this. At relationships, at vulnerability, at letting people in. I will work too much and forget to be present and prioritize my career over everything else, because that is all I know how to do. The server arrived to clear our plates, providing a natural pause in the conversation. When we were alone again, I reached across the table and took her hand. I am not asking you to be good at it. I am asking you to try. Her fingers tightened around mine. What if trying is not enough? Then we figure it out together. That is what I learned from Rachel. Love is not about being perfect. It is about showing up even when you are going to fail. The evening ended with a kiss in the parking lot, tentative at first, then deeper, as the weeks of careful distance collapsed between us. When we finally separated, Vivian's expression held equal parts hope and terror. I'm going to mess this up somehow. I smiled and brushed a strand of hair from her face. Probably. And then we will fix it. Together. Monday morning shattered the fragile peace we had constructed. I arrived at my desk to find the office buzzing with an energy that felt wrong, colleagues huddled in clusters, speaking in lowered voices, glances darting toward me and away. My computer revealed the source of the chaos, an anonymous email sent to the company-wide distribution list the previous night. The message was brief and devastating. Interesting how some people get special treatment around here. Maybe check who is having dinner with who on Friday nights. Bradley's handiwork, I knew it with the certainty of someone who had been watching him watch me for weeks. The email contained no names, but the implication was clear enough for anyone paying attention. Vivian was already in Andrew Sterling's office when I arrived at her floor. Through the glass walls, I could see her standing before his desk, her posture rigid with the controlled tension of someone fighting a battle on unfamiliar ground. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. When she emerged, her expression was the professional mask I had grown to recognize as her armor. Patricia Brennan intercepted me before I could reach my desk. "Mr. Calloway, I will need to speak with you again this afternoon." The second HR meeting was longer than the first, more pointed in its questions, more explicit in its warnings. I answered honestly, confirming the dinner, but emphasizing that no workplace policies had been violated. Patricia listened with the careful attention of someone assembling a case, her notes growing longer with each response. That evening, I found Vivian in the parking garage, leaning against her car, with the exhausted posture of someone who had spent the day defending herself. "I am so sorry, Nathan. This is my fault. I should have been more careful." "It is not your fault that someone decided to weaponize gossip. Maybe this is a sign that we should stop, before it affects your career more than it already has." The suggestion hit me with unexpected force. After weeks of careful distance, after finally admitting what had been building between us, the thought of retreating felt like a betrayal of everything we had risked. No, I'm not letting office politics dictate my personal life. I have spent too long letting fear make my decisions. What about HR, the investigation? I told Patricia the truth. We are adults pursuing a relationship outside of work. If that violates some unwritten rule, then the rule needs changing. I took her hand, steadying us both. "This matters, Vivian. What is happening between us matters. I will not let Bradley Haynes or anyone else take it away." She studied me for a long moment, searching for doubt or hesitation. Finding neither, she released a breath that carried the weight of the day. "Sterling told me the favoritism allegations cannot be substantiated. My performance reviews document harder criticism of your work than anyone else's. There is no evidence of inappropriate preferential treatment, because there has not been any. You have been tougher on me than Bradley, and we both know it." The ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Someone told me that expensive does not mean exclusive. I wanted to make sure you earned everything you achieved. I plan to keep earning it, and I plan to keep seeing you. Those two things are not mutually exclusive." She squeezed my hands once before releasing them. "We should be more careful at the office. No unnecessary interactions, no private conversations that could be misinterpreted." "Agreed. And outside the office," her smile widened slightly. "Outside the office, I believe we have a birthday party to plan." Ren's 5th birthday arrived on a Saturday that carried the golden warmth of early autumn. My backyard transformed into a prehistoric wonderland through a combination of online party supplies and my mother's enthusiastic crafting abilities. Dinosaur streamers hung from every available surface. A cardboard volcano dominated the refreshment table. The obstacle course I had constructed from borrowed equipment promised adventures appropriate for both 4-year-olds and their slightly older companions. 8 children from Ren's preschool arrived in various states of excitement, their parents depositing them with the grateful relief of adults granted a few hours of freedom. Oliver came early, with Vivian, his usual reserve, temporarily forgotten in the face of decorations that spoke directly to his obsessions. Grace and Walter took up positions near the food, managing the logistical chaos with the practiced efficiency of experienced grandparents. I watched Vivian as she helped Oliver navigate the party's social terrain, noting how she balanced attention between him and the other children, how she deflected curious glances from preschool parents who recognized her from nowhere but sensed significance in her presence. She wore jeans and a casual blouse, the corporate armor entirely absent, and seeing her in this context felt like witnessing something private and precious. My mother appeared beside me with the timing of someone who had been waiting for the right moment. I like her. She does not try too hard with Ren, but she pays attention. That matters. We are taking things slowly. Grace nodded with apparent acceptance. As you should. But Nathan, do not use caution as an excuse for fear. Life is too short for that kind of self-protection. Later, as the party wound toward its conclusion and exhausted children began seeking their parents, I found myself standing beside Vivian near the remnants of the dinosaur cake. Ren and Oliver had collapsed together and on the grass, too tired for their usual debates, simply existing in the comfortable silence of genuine friendship. They are good for each other, Vivian observed quietly. Oliver has never had a friend like Ren. She brings him out of himself in ways I could not manage alone. Like her mother did with everyone she met. The words emerged without conscious intention the first time I had mentioned Rachel to Vivian in weeks. She did not flinch from the reference. Tell me about her, if you want to. So I did. Standing in my backyard amid the debris of a children's party, I told Vivian about Rachel's laugh and her patience and her stubborn insistence on finding joy in ordinary moments. I described the rainy day treasure hunts in the bedtime story voices in the way she had looked at Ren like our daughter was the most miraculous thing in the universe. I shared memories I had guarded jealously for months, offering them to this woman who was becoming something I had not expected to find again. Vivian listened without interruption, her attention complete and unwavering. When I finally fell silent, she reached for my hand with a touch that carried understanding rather than possession. She sounds remarkable. Ren has so much of her in her. She does, but she is making her own path too, as children do, as we all must. Her hand remained in mine as we watched the children rest, and for the first time since Rachel's death, I felt the possibility of a future that held more than survival. 2 days later, my phone rang with a call I had been dreading since Ren's birthday party. George Dawson's voice carried the formal tension of a man conducting unpleasant business. Nathan, Margaret and I would like to see Ren this weekend. We have heard things that concern us. My grip tightened on the phone. What kind of things, George, that you are seeing someone? That you brought a woman to Ren's birthday party? The pause that followed bristled with unspoken accusation. Is this true? I chose my words with care, balancing honesty against defense. I have started seeing someone, yes. Her name is Vivian. The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. When George spoke again, his voice had hardened. It has only been 18 months, Nathan. Almost 2 years, and I am not replacing Rachel. No one could. Margaret is concerned. She wants to make sure Ren is not being confused or hurt by this. The implications sparked anger I struggled to contain. Ren is thriving. She is happier than she has been since Rachel died. And part of that happiness comes from having friends who understand her. We want to meet this woman before things go any further. When I am ready to make that introduction, I will. But George, this is my life and Ren's life. I loved your daughter more than anything in this world. That will never change. But Rachel would not want us to stop living because she is gone. The call ended with nothing resolved, another complication added to a situation already crowded with them. That evening, Vivian listened to my recounting with the focused attention she brought to every problem. They are grieving. Rachel was their only child and Ren is their connection to her. I know, but their grief does not give them the right to dictate how I live my life. She was quiet for a moment, processing. Maybe meeting me would help. Let them see that I am not trying to erase Rachel from Ren's life. Maybe, but not yet. Not until we are sure about what this is. Her hand found mine across the space between us. I am sure, Nathan. I have been sure since that first dinner. Before I could respond, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Her expression shifted as she glanced at the screen, tension replacing warmth. It is my sister. I need to take this. The conversation that followed was audible only as fragments from my position across the room. Vivian's voice rose and fell with emotions I could not identify, her posture growing more rigid with each exchange. When she finally ended the call, her face held the particular devastation of someone receiving terrible news. Guarbiet is fighting for full custody of Oliver. He is claiming Diane is an unfit mother because she travels for work. My stomach dropped. Can he do that? Apparently he has a lawyer who thinks so. and he is using me as evidence against her, saying that my involvement proves Diane has delegated her parenting responsibilities. I moved to sit beside her, offering presence rather than solutions. What does Diane's lawyer say? That we need character witnesses, people who can testify that Oliver thrives under the current arrangement. She looked at me with something approaching desperation. If Garrett wins, I lose Oliver. He has made that explicitly clear. And Oliver barely knows him. He sees his father once a month, if that. How is that better for anyone? I took her hand, steadying her as she had steadied me through so many difficult moments. Then we fight. Being a parent is not about blood. It is about showing up day after day, proving that someone matters enough to put their needs above your own. You have done that for Oliver every single day since Diane's divorce. No court can ignore that. Vivian held my gaze, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You would testify for me, for Oliver, for what is right. Of course I would. The company-wide announcement came on a Thursday morning that felt ordinary until it became extraordinary. Andrew Sterling stood at the head of the main conference room, his voice carrying the measured confidence of someone delivering news he had carefully orchestrated. Vivian stood beside him, her expression composed despite the magnitude of what was about to change. I am pleased to announce that Vivian Mercer has been promoted to Executive Director of Marketing effective immediately. She will oversee all regional accounts while reporting directly to me. Applause rippled through the assembled staff. I joined it automatically, my mind racing through the implications of what Sterling had just declared. Executive Director meant a different reporting structure. It meant Vivian would no longer be my direct supervisor. It meant the professional barrier that had complicated everything between us had just dissolved. Vivian's eyes found mine across the crowded room, a brief connection that carried acknowledgement of everything unspoken. Bradley Haynes stood near the coffee station with an expression that suggested he was calculating new angles of attack. Patricia Brennan observed from the back of the room with the neutral attention of someone cataloging information for future reference. After the meeting dispersed, I made my way to Vivian's office through the congratulatory crowd. Her door was open, colleagues filing in and out with well wishes and questions about the transition. I waited until a gap appeared before stepping inside. Her smile was genuine despite the exhaustion visible around her eyes. Nathan, come in. Congratulations. Executive Director is a significant achievement. It is also significantly more work. She gestured to the stack of documents already accumulating on her desk. Chicago next week, Seattle the week after. The regional accounts are in worse shape than Sterling let on. The travel schedule she was describing would strain any relationship, let alone one as new as ours. I chose my words carefully. We will figure it out. That is what we do. I know. Her voice softened. But I wanted you to hear it from me first. The next few months are going to be demanding. I will be gone more than I am here. And when you are here, when I am here, I intend to make every moment count. 2 weeks after the promotion, the custody hearing delivered its first devastating blow. Vivian's call came late on a Tuesday evening, her voice carrying the raw edge of someone fighting to maintain composure. The judge granted Garrett temporary custody. 2 weeks. I cannot see Oliver for 2 weeks while they evaluate both households. I sat down slowly, the weight of her words settling into my chest. On what grounds? Insufficient parental presence. Garrett claimed Diane travels too much, that I have been acting as a surrogate parent, that Oliver needs a more stable environment. Her breath caught. He used me against her, Nathan. My involvement became evidence of her neglect. The irony was cruel and calculated. Vivian's dedication to Oliver, her presence during every crisis and milestone, had been twisted into ammunition by a man who barely knew his own son. I thought of Oliver's careful trust, the way he had emerged from silence through dinosaur facts and Saturday pancakes, the friendship he had built with Wren that represented his first real connection with a peer. 2 weeks is not permanent. What does Diane's lawyer say? That we need to build a stronger case for the final hearing. Character witnesses, documentation of Oliver's progress, testimony about his emotional state under both arrangements. Then we build it. I will testify about what I have seen. My parents will confirm how Oliver has changed since becoming friends with Wren. His progress is documented and observable. You would do that? Go to court, make a formal statement. Oliver matters. Your relationship with him matters. Of course I would do that. The silence on the line stretched long enough to become its own communication. When Vivian spoke again, her voice had steadied. I do not know what I did to deserve you, Nathan Calloway. You showed up every day for Oliver and for me. That is what people do for the ones they love. The word hung between us, unacknowledged until now. Neither of us moved to clarify or retract it. Garrett Thornton's lawyer was thorough in a way that suggested expensive expertise. The preliminary hearing took place in a Denver family court that smelled of institutional cleanliness and human desperation. I sat in the gallery beside Grace and Walter, watching Vivian take the witness stand with the controlled calm she brought to corporate presentations. The opposing attorney approached her with the calculated friendliness of someone preparing to strike. Mrs. Mercer, how many hours per week would you estimate you spend with Oliver? When my sister is traveling approximately 40 hours over a weekend, otherwise perhaps 10 to 15 hours weekly. And Oliver's mother, how many hours does she spend with him during those same periods? She works full-time, as does Mr. Thornton. When she is home, she is with Oliver constantly. Is it not true that Oliver refers to you as his second mother? Vivian's expression remained steady. Children express affection in many ways. What matters is that Oliver knows exactly who his mother is and where his primary home exists. Yet you take him to restaurants, parks, museums, activities typically associated with parental involvement. I take him to places where he can learn and grow and experience joy. That is what family does. That is what aunts do. That is what loving someone means, showing up even when it is inconvenient. When the judge, a woman in her 50s, with the wary patience of someone who had heard every variation of custody disputes, leaned forward. Ms. Mercer, in your assessment, have you overstepped your role as Oliver's aunt? Vivian turned to address her directly. No, Your Honor. I believe I have stepped up, because that is what you do when a child in your family needs support. Oliver's parents divorced in circumstances that caused him significant trauma. He stopped speaking for 6 months. He needed stability, routine, unconditional presence. I provided that not instead of his mother, but alongside her. My testimony came later that afternoon, a recitation of observations I had made over months of Saturday mornings and shared meals. I described Oliver's transformation from near silence to animated conversation, his friendship with Wren, the way his vocabulary had expanded as his confidence grew. The opposing lawyer attempted to suggest my testimony was biased by my relationship with Vivian, but the facts were documented in preschool records and therapist reports that corroborated everything I had witnessed. The final ruling came 3 weeks later, delivered in a courtroom that felt smaller than it had during the hearings. The judge's voice was measured and final. After reviewing testimony and evidence, this court finds that Oliver Thornton has thrived under his mother's care, supported by extended family involvement, that has contributed positively to his development. The father's motion for full custody is denied. Primary custody remains with Ms. Thornton, with standard visitation rights for Mr. Thornton. Diane collapsed against her lawyer with relief that bordered on physical. Vivian sat motionless for a long moment, processing the verdict, before turning to find me in the gallery. The emotion in her eyes needed no translation. Oliver was waiting with my parents when we emerged from the courthouse. He ran to Vivian with the unguarded joy of a child who did not fully understand what had almost been lost, but recognized that something important had been protected. Aunt Vivi, does this mean I can still come to your house? She gathered him into her arms with a fierceness that startled him. Every weekend you want little Mel, every single one. The resolution of the custody battle created space for the conversation I had been avoiding since George Dawson's phone call. Rachel's parents arrived on a Saturday morning, their rental car pulling into my driveway with the hesitation of people approaching uncertain territory. I had asked Vivian to give us time alone first to let me navigate the initial confrontation without the complication of her presence. Margaret emerged from the passenger seat with the careful movements of someone managing chronic pain, her eyes scanning the small house where her granddaughter now lived. George followed with the stoic expression I remembered from Rachel's funeral, the face of a man who had learned to contain grief beneath layers of control. Wren greeted them with the uncomplicated enthusiasm of childhood, launching into stories about school and friends and the new dinosaur book Oliver had lent her. I watched Rachel's parents process the unfamiliar name, the mention of this boy who had become so important to their granddaughter's happiness. Once Wren was settled in the backyard with her toys, Margaret turned to me with the directness I had always appreciated about her. "We are not here to cause trouble, Nathan. We just need to understand what is happening. What is happening is that I am trying to build a life that honors Rachel while also moving forward. Those two things are not mutually exclusive." George's voice carried the weight of loss that had not diminished with time. "It has not even been 2 years. How can you be certain this woman is worth risking what you had with our daughter?" "I am not risking anything, George. What I had with Rachel is irreplaceable. It exists in Wren and in me and in every memory we shared. But Rachel would not want us to stop living because she is gone. She would want Wren to see her father happy. She would want me to model what healthy love looks like, not what permanent grief becomes." Margaret's eyes glistened. "How do you know that? How can you be so certain about what she would want?" I had been waiting for this question, preparing for it, since the night I finally read the last pages of Rachel's journal. I retrieved the worn notebook from its place on my bookshelf, the pages softened by repeated handling, and opened it to an entry I had nearly memorized. She told me, in the journal she kept for Wren during her illness. Would you like to hear what she wrote? The reading took place in my small living room, the three of us arranged around the coffee table like participants in a ritual none of us had expected. I turned to the final entry, Rachel's handwriting growing shakier as her illness progressed, but her words remaining clear and deliberate. "My dearest Wren, by the time you are old enough to read this, I hope Daddy has found someone wonderful, someone who makes him laugh again, someone who will love you not as a replacement for me, but as their own gift to protect and cherish. Do not be sad for him, sweetheart, and do not let him be sad forever. He deserves joy. You both do. And to Nathan, if you are reading this, I know you. I know you will blame yourself for moving on. Please do not. Love is not finite. Your heart has room for me and whoever comes next. I will always be Wren's mother. That can never change. But let her have more love, not less. That is all I want. Forever yours, Rachel." Margaret's composure crumbled completely. George reached for her hand, his own control wavering. The silence that followed was filled with grief that had found new expression, permission granted from beyond the boundary that separated us from the woman we had all loved. She knew. Margaret's voice was barely audible. She always thought of everyone else. She did, I agreed, and I have honored that by waiting until I found someone worthy of what she asked. Vivian is not trying to replace Rachel. She has her own place in our lives, her own relationship with Wren. Meeting her might help you understand that. George wiped his eyes with the rough gesture of a man unaccustomed to displaying emotion. Maybe we should. Maybe that would make this easier. The meeting happened a week later at a dinner I prepared in my small kitchen, with the careful attention of someone hosting a summit between opposing nations. Vivian arrived with homemade cookies and the controlled nervousness of someone who understood the stakes. Wren provided inadvertent assistance by immediately demanding that Vivian help her show the grandparents her dinosaur collection. The evening proceeded with the awkward politeness of strangers seeking common ground. Margaret asked Vivian questions about her work and her family with the thoroughness of an investigation, while George observed with the quiet attention of someone forming judgments. Vivian answered honestly, acknowledging her career focus and the limitations it created, explaining her relationship with Oliver and what it had taught her about caring for children. The turning point came when Margaret asked a question that cut through the careful diplomacy. "What do you know about Rachel?" Vivian met her gaze without flinching. "I know she was a third-grade teacher who loved her students. I know she created rainy day treasure hunts for Wren that Nathan still continues. I know she wrote a journal for her daughter that represents one of the most beautiful gifts a mother could leave. I know she was the kind of person who thought about others even while she was dying. And I know that everything good in Wren, her kindness and her curiosity and her fierce little heart, came from being raised by a remarkable woman." Margaret's eyes filled with tears that seemed different from grief. "Nathan told you all of that." "Nathan told me some. Wren told me more. She talks about her mother constantly, and I listen because those stories matter. I have no intention of replacing Rachel. I just want to add to the love that already exists." George cleared his throat. What happens if things do not work out between you and Nathan? The question was fair, the concern it represented legitimate. Vivian considered it with the seriousness it deserved. Then I will be grateful for the time I had with both of them. And I hope Ren and Oliver would still be allowed to be friends because that relationship matters regardless of what happens between their adults. Something shifted in Margaret's expression. Resistance giving way to reluctant acceptance. You are different than I expected. How so? More honest, less threatening. You actually seem to understand what you are asking to become part of. Vivian reached across the table to take Margaret's hand, a gesture that surprised them both. I am terrified, actually. I have never been good at relationships. I work too much and guard myself too carefully, and I do not know how to be soft. But Nathan makes me want to try, and Ren makes me believe I could be better than I have been. The dinner ended with handshakes that had become something warmer. Promises to visit again soon, a fragile bridge constructed between past and present. As George and Margaret drove away, I stood beside Vivian in the driveway and felt something settle into place. That went better than I expected. She leaned against me, exhaustion and relief combined. I meant what I said, Nathan, about being terrified, about not knowing if I can be what you and Ren need. You already are. The rest is just practice. 6 months after the custody ruling, my friend Marcus Webb called with information that would reshape everything. Marcus worked in real estate, specializing in the Denver suburbs, and he had developed a talent for matching properties with circumstances. Nathan, the house next to yours. The Petersons are relocating to Arizona. It is going on the market next week, but I can get you early access if you are interested. I was standing in my backyard when the call came, watching Ren and Oliver conduct an elaborate dinosaur expedition through the bushes along the fence line. The house he was describing shared that fence. Its backyard connected to mine through a gate I had never seen opened. How much? Probably $380 in this market. Not cheap, but solid value for the neighborhood. I thanked him and ended the call with an idea forming that I knew was premature and possibly insane. That evening, I led Vivian to the empty property using Marcus's lockbox code to access a house that smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. She walked through the rooms with growing confusion. Why are we here? Because I have been thinking. We have both been careful, taking things slowly, maintaining separate spaces while our lives become increasingly intertwined. But the children are already family to each other. And this house right here offers something neither of us expected. I led her to the back windows pointing to the shared fence and the gate that could connect our yards. Separate enough to go at our own pace. Close enough that Ren and Oliver could see each other whenever they want. No one is asking anyone to move in together or make declarations before we are ready. Just proximity. Just possibility. Vivian stared at the backyard where our children could eventually run freely between their homes. This is insane. We have been officially together for 4 months. I know. It is too fast. I know. My sister will say I am being impulsive and irrational. Probably. Your parents will think we have lost our minds. Almost certainly. She turned to face me, her expression caught between disbelief and something that looked like hope. So why does it feel right? I took her hand, steadying us both. Because sometimes the heart knows things before the mind catches up. And because I am done letting fear make my decisions. Her answer came the next morning, delivered via text while I was making Ren's breakfast. I made an offer on the house. They accepted. We close in 30 days. The year that followed moved with the rhythm of lives learning to interweave. Vivian and Oliver settled into the house next door, and the gate between our backyards became the most traveled path in the neighborhood. Ren and Oliver developed routines that crossed property lines without acknowledgement and appearing at each other's breakfast tables, conducting joint expeditions, arguing about dinosaurs with the comfortable familiarity of siblings. Vivian's travel schedule remained demanding, but we developed systems that accommodated her absences. Grace and Walter became regular fixtures, providing backup during work trips and emergency coverage during unexpected crises. Diane visited monthly, her relationship with Oliver strengthened by the legal battle they had survived together. Rachel's photographs remained on my walls. Her journal occupied a place of honor on my bookshelf. Ren continued the rainy day treasure hunts her mother had started, hiding small objects for Oliver to find when storms kept them indoors. The past and present coexisted without competition, each having its own space in the life we were building. Bradley Haynes eventually left Sterling for a position at a smaller agency. Patricia Brennan's investigation concluded with findings of no policy violations and a recommendation that the company update its fraternization guidelines to reflect modern workplace realities. Andrew Sterling mentioned during a quarterly review that the Morrison campaign had become a case study for client re-engagement strategies. Through it all, Vivian and I learned the particular rhythms of partnership between people who had both known loss. We argued about work schedules and parenting philosophies and whose turn it was to handle bedtime routines. We celebrated promotions and weathered disappointments and navigated the thousand small negotiations that constitute a shared life. We discovered that love built in middle age has different qualities than love found young, more patient, more deliberate, more aware of what can be lost. 2 years after the dating app notification that started everything, I found myself staring at my phone on a Tuesday evening that felt heavy with significance. Ren was asleep, her breathing steady through the monitor I still kept beside my bed. The house was quiet. The text I had composed glowed on the screen. Ren is asleep. Come over. I have something important to ask you. I sent it before I could reconsider, then spent the next 5 minutes regretting the ambiguity of my phrasing. Vivian's response arrived quickly. That sounds ominous. Give me 5 minutes. The backyard was ready when she arrived. String lights wound through the branches of the old oak tree. A blanket spread across the grass where we had shared countless conversations over countless evenings. A small vase held white roses, Rachel's favorite, placed there deliberately because this moment needed to honor everything that had come before. Vivian stepped through the gate with an expression that balanced curiosity against concern. What is all this? I took her hand and led her to the blanket, settling us both beneath the canopy of lights that transformed our ordinary backyard into something approaching magic. Do you remember when you asked me out and I said no? Her laugh carried 2 years of history. Not my finest moment, but yes, I remember. I said no because I was afraid of complicating our work relationship, afraid of introducing someone new into Ren's life only to lose them, afraid of what it meant that I could feel something for someone who was not Rachel. Those were valid concerns. They were, but here's what I have learned since then. When I paused gathering words that had been building toward this moment for months. Work relationships can be navigated. People can enter children's lives in ways that enrich rather than threaten. And loving someone new does not diminish what came before. It honors it because it means you learned how to love well enough to do it again. I reached into my pocket for the small box I had been carrying for weeks, waiting for the right moment. So I am asking now what you asked me then, though with considerably higher stakes. The box opened to reveal a ring that had cost more than I could comfortably afford and less than Vivian deserved. Simple and elegant, chosen for its honesty rather than its extravagance. Vivian Mercer, will you marry me, dinosaur debates and all? The tears came before her answer, streaming down her face with an intensity that might have worried me if I had not seen her smile through them. Yes, absolutely, completely, terrifyingly yes. The kiss that followed tasted like promise and relief and the particular sweetness of risks that had paid off. When we finally separated, Vivian examined the ring on her finger with an expression of wonder that I wanted to preserve forever. I thought I knew what my life was going to look like. Career success maybe, Oliver, but nothing else. Then you appeared with your daughter and your grief and your absolute refusal to let me keep you at arm's length. You made it difficult. The professional distance, the walls you put up. The walls were the only things I knew how to build. You taught me that sometimes what you need is someone willing to sit outside them until you learn how to let them down. From somewhere inside my house, the monitor crackled with the sound of Ren stirring. Her voice, sleepy and querulous, carried through the device. Daddy, is Aunt Vivi there? I smiled at the title my daughter had bestowed months ago, her child's way of claiming Vivian as family. She is here, Ren Bear. Good. Tell her Oliver wants dinosaur pancakes tomorrow. He texted me. Vivian laughed at the absurdity of children with the communication capabilities. Tell her I will be there at 8 sharp. I relayed the message and listened as Ren settled back into sleep with the satisfied sound of a child whose world made sense. The monitor fell silent. The string lights swayed gently in an evening breeze. Beside me, the woman who had become my future adjusted to wearing a ring that represented my faith in second chances. Life rarely follows the path we plan. I spoke the words to the stars as much as to Vivian. But sometimes the detours lead us exactly where we need to be. She leaned against me, her head finding its familiar place on my shoulder. Is that from something? It is from Rachel, the last line of her journal, her final gift to Ren. She sounds like she was very wise. She was, and I think she would have liked you. I hope so. I hope wherever she is, she knows that her daughter is loved and her husband is happy, and everything she wished for has come true. We sat together beneath the lights until the evening cooled and practicality reasserted itself. There would be announcements to make and celebrations to plan, and a future to build from the foundation we had been laying for 2 years. But for now, this moment was enough. More than enough. It was everything.